Story 1. The Shadow on the Platform. It all began with a fleeting, barely perceptible flash at the edge of my vision. A dark spot that faded when I tried to look at it head-on. At first, I put it down to tiredness. I worked long shifts at a coffee shop in Brickell, and the chaos of Miami had me on edge. But it wasn't just exhaustion. It was something else. Something that shouldn't be there, lurking in the crevices of my routine. My life was ordinary before that. I was studying psychology in college, working part-time to pay the bills, and taking the Metrorail every day from my apartment in Kendall to downtown. It was on one of those grey mornings, when the sky was covered with heavy clouds and the air smelled of impending rain, that I saw her for the first time, a shadow on the edge of the platform. He was not the shadow of someone or something tangible. It was a pure, dense darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it, like a miniature black hole. I turned, looking for its origin, but the platform was almost empty. Just a couple of distant figures, silhouettes blurred under the glare of fluorescent lamps, too distant to project. The sound of the train approaching filled the air, a metallic roar that reverberated off the concrete walls and made the ground beneath my feet tremble. I tried to convince myself that it was a play of light, a strange reflection in the dirty windows of the train, or perhaps a trick of my exhausted mind. But the next day, he returned. This time, closer. I was standing by a pillar, motionless, and I felt a knot in my stomach, a chill that didn't explain the damp, sticky heat of Miami. "You're paranoid," I repeated to myself, tucking my backpack over my shoulder as I boarded the car. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that he was watching me, as if I had hundreds of invisible eyes riveted on my back. As the days went by, the shadow became more insistent. I would show up in window reflections as I walked through the crowded streets of Brickell, in the cramped, dimly lit hallway of my apartment, even in the bathroom mirror, as I washed my face with cold water to clear my head. It always dodges, always at the edge of my sight, like a predator playing with its prey. I started turning constantly, looking over my shoulder at every corner, but there was never anything. Just me and that presence I couldn't explain. A weight that settled on my chest like a dense fog. One afternoon, while having coffee with my friend Carlos on a terrace overlooking Biscayne Bay, I tried to bring it up. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the salty breeze, and the sound of the waves crashing against the pier contrasted with the storm raging inside me. I asked, feigning indifference as I stirred the sugar in my cup with a spoon that trembled slightly in my hand. He answered, arching an eyebrow and adjusting his sunglasses over his nose. "I watch her all the time, as if she were following me." He laughed, patting me on the shoulder that resonated louder than I expected. "Sleep more, you're hallucinating." "How many hours did you work this week?" 40, 50. But it was not a hallucination. One night, returning home under a full moon that illuminated the streets with a ghostly glow, the shadow followed me down the main avenue. The glass buildings reflected their silver light, and the sound of cars buzzed around me. But she was there, slipping through the shadows of the lampposts. I walked fast, sweat sticking to my t-shirt, but she kept my pace. I turned a corner, my heart in my throat, and as I looked back, I was closer, its silhouette sharper against the neon lights of bars and restaurants. I ran to my building, climbed the stairs trembling, tripping over the worn steps, and locked the door. Panting, I looked out the window with the curtains ajar. There I was, on the sidewalk, motionless, staring at my window with a blood-chilling intensity, as if he could see me through the walls. That night I didn't sleep. I stood with the lights on, sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee that cooled in my hands, searching for answers in the silence. Was it real? Or was he losing his mind? The next day, I consulted a psychologist at the university. After a few sessions, he diagnosed me with mild post-traumatic stress. "It's your mind playing tricks," he said in a calm voice, prescribing sleeping pills that I left unopened in a drawer. I didn't believe him. The shadow was real, and it was becoming more aggressive, as if my resistance was feeding it. Soon, he wasn't just following me. He began to whisper. At first, they were indistinct murmurs, like the wind blowing through the trees on a moonless night, but then they cleared up. "Come here. No. Look." The words were broken fragments, but their tone was icy, inhuman, as if it came from a place beyond this world. I felt his cold breath on the back of my neck, as if he were inches away from me, even inside my own apartment. I tried to escape. I stopped taking the Metrorail. I walked everywhere in the scorching sun, but she was always there, in the shadows of the buildings, in the dark alleys where the light didn't reach. My apartment is no longer a refuge. I felt it in the corners where the light from the lamps could not penetrate. One night, in desperation, I made a decision. On June 3rd, I returned to Brickell Station, where it all began. The platform was deserted, just me and the echo of my footsteps echoing in the silence. The shadow waited at the end of the platform, motionless, like a statue carved in darkness. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking in the void, amplified by the concrete walls. She did not answer, but began to approach, gliding without touching the ground, as if the air itself were holding her. The cold paralyzed me. My body refused to move as she stopped in front of me just a meter away. For the first time, I saw something in its darkness. A human form, but twisted, like smoke trapped in a broken mold, with limbs that elongated and contorted in impossible ways. Then I felt an invisible push, a force that I couldn't see but that hit me like a wall. My body leaned over the edge, and I fell into the Miami River, the black waters parting to greet me. As the water swallowed me, the whispers ceased. The shadow faded into the undulating surface, and for a moment I felt peace, as if the weight of his presence had dissolved into the current. They found my body the next day, trapped between the rocks of the river. They said it was suicide, that the stress had broken me. No one saw the shadow. No one has ever seen her. But maybe it's still there, on the Brickell platform, waiting between the pillars and tracks, invisible to the unsuspecting. Maybe he's looking for you right now, hiding at the edge of your vision. Story 2. The man who was always there. He was always there. Every morning as I walked out of my apartment in the heart of downtown Miami, I would see it. Grey coat, black hat, blank gaze fixed on me from across the street. At first I thought it was a coincidence. Miami is big, but the streets of downtown are a knot of roads that constantly intersect. But there was something about him that made my skin crawl, a chill that didn't fit in with the sweltering heat of the tropics. It wasn't just her clothes out of place, a long coat in the middle of summer. It was how he looked at me, as if he knew something intimate, a secret that I myself did not know, something buried in the depths of my mind. I tried not to give it importance. My life was a whirlwind of monotony. I worked as an assistant in an insurance office, lived alone in a small, thin-walled apartment, and returned home exhausted every night. I hadn't done anything to justify that attention, nothing that stood out in my grey routine. But his presence became constant, an unsettling reminder at every corner of my day. I saw him in reflections from the windows as he walked down Flagler Street, among the bustling crowd of tourists and office workers, always at a distance, always watchful. I checked my door locks twice before leaving, turned the key with shaky fingers, but it didn't work. He was waiting for me, motionless in the hot sun or the pouring rain, like a clock that never fails. One afternoon I changed my route. I took secondary, less traveled streets, a maze of alleys between office buildings and shuttered shops. Sweat ran down my forehead, soaking my shirt as I dodged puddles and potholes. I arrived at the METROMOVER with my heart racing, convinced that I had misled him. I climbed into the car, breathing a sigh of relief between the hum of the air conditioning and the murmur of the passengers. But when I looked up, there it was, at the back of the car, looking at me with those empty eyes that seemed to pierce me. My pulse soared, a frantic drumming in my chest. How did I know my way? Had he followed me all along, invisible in the shadows of the city? That night, from my window on the 10th floor, I saw him downstairs, under a lantern that flickered as if it were about to go out. His face was hidden in the gloom, but his posture was unmistakable. I closed the curtains with a sudden tug, but sleep did not come. I lay awake, listening to the distant noise of traffic and the hum of the fan, wondering if he was still there. I talked to neighbors, banging on doors with sweaty hands. No one had seen him. I called the police, stuttering as I described the man in the grey coat, but they looked at me skeptically and wrote down my complaint in a notebook they would probably never review. It was as if there existed for me alone, a personal spectrum woven from my own fears. I tried everything. I changed schedules, took other trains, took days off, and locked myself in my apartment with the lights off. But he reappeared, sometimes closer, sometimes disappearing, only to return when I least expected it, like a shadow mocking my sanity. One morning, in the METROMOVER, I saw him at the end of the platform, motionless in the dawn mist. I decided to confront him. I walked toward him, my heart in my mouth, sweat sliding down the back of my neck, but as I approached, it vanished. There was nowhere to hide, no corner where he could have slipped away on that open platform. It was as if the air had swallowed him, leaving only the echo of my footsteps. Over lunch, I told my colleague Maria in the office cafeteria. "I think someone is following me," I said nervously, fiddling with the edge of my sandwich. He asked, frowning as he sipped his coffee. "A man, grey coat, black hat. He's always there looking at me." "Speak confidently," he suggested, but his eyes reflected doubt, as if he thought he was exaggerating. That night, I saw him outside my building. The light from the lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows on the sidewalk, and he stood there, motionless, like a stone statue. I walked over, determined to end this, but when I arrived, I was gone. All that remained was the echo of my footsteps and a cold that could not explain the tropical breeze, a cold that crept under my skin. On March 27th, 2025, I decided to face it at once. I took the METROMOVER as usual, alert, with sharp senses. The car was full. Workers with briefcases, tourists with cameras, a constant noise of voices and laughter. I felt safe among the people, protected by the crowd. But then I saw him, by the door, looking at me from the other side of the car. I tried to move, to make my way through the bodies, but the mass of passengers caught me. He advanced, invisible to others, his presence like an icy shadow that cut through human warmth. The train stopped at Government Center, and people came out en masse, pushing me onto the platform. I tried to escape, running up the stairs, but I felt him behind me, his cold breath brushing my neck like a deadly caress. A sharp pain pierced my side. I looked down, an invisible knife, blood gushing between my fingers as I tried to stop her. I fell to my knees, people screamed around me, and he watched me from a distance. His face, finely visible under the hat, was not human. It was a mask of shadows, featureless, just a void that absorbed the light. As he died, I watched him fade into the crowd, as if he had never been there. Police said they caught someone, a random thief, but there was never a clear motive. Maybe he wasn't a man. Maybe it was something more, an unnamed entity that still haunts the streets of Miami, looking for someone to follow, waiting in the shadows of the city. Story 3. The Ghosts of the Government Center. There are places in Miami that no one names, dark corners where the city seems to hold its breath, as if it is afraid of awakening something old. One of those places is under the Government Center, an abandoned METRORail platform, known among workers as the Ghost Platform. I worked there years ago, when they were still trying to build it, and that's when I saw them. The shadows that shouldn't exist, presences that clung to the concrete as if they were part of it. It was an ambitious project, an extension that promised to unite the city from downtown to the northern suburbs. I was an electrician, a quiet guy who installed cables in the bowels of the structure, going down every day to that cold and damp hole. But everything collapsed. Endless delays, money that disappeared into corrupt pockets, and the platform was left like a concrete corpse, without trains or life, only a silent echo that resounded in its empty tunnels. From the beginning, that place made my nerves stand on edge. The air was colder than it should have been, a chill that crept into the bones despite the Miami heat. The echoes were deeper, as if the void was speaking, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. At first they were small details, shadows moving where no one was there, the distant rumble of ghost trains on tracks that were never built. One afternoon, while I was adjusting a cable on the edge of the platform, I saw a figure at the end of the platform. Tall, thin, motionless, silhouetted against the gloom. I thought he was an intruder, perhaps a homeless man who had snuck in. I grabbed my flashlight and moved forward, shouting a "Who's there?" that resounded unanswered. But as I approached, it vanished, dissolving into darkness as if it had never been there. I asked my supervisor the next day, trying to sound casual as we ate lunch on the surface. I said, tearing off a piece of bread with nervous fingers. He answered, laughing between bites of his sandwich. "There's only dust and rats. Relax. You're seeing things that don't exist." But they were not rats or imaginations. The shadows became bolder over time. I felt his eyes on my back as I worked, an invisible weight following me between the pillars. Sometimes, as I turned quickly, I would catch a movement, a dark flash that disappeared before I could focus on it. One night, I went down alone with my flashlight, determined to finish a stretch of wiring before the weekend. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the dripping of water somewhere far away. I walked across the platform, the beam of light trembling in my hand, and there it was, a figure in the center of the platform, solid but faceless, like a hole cut out in reality, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it. I walked closer, shivering, cold sweat mixing with the dust on my skin. The shadow slid toward me, swift as lightning, and its whispers filled the air, a chorus of broken voices overlapping. "Stay with us, here, forever." I tried to run, my boots hitting the concrete, but the platform stretched out before my eyes, an endless corridor that twisted. The stairs were gone, replaced by a solid wall. The shadows surrounded me, their icy hands brushing my body, pulling me into the darkness. I knew at that moment that they wouldn't let me go. I screamed, but my voice was lost in the void, drowned out by his murmurs. The next day, they suspended the project for security reasons. No one explained more, but I know why. The shadows wanted company, souls for their dark realm beneath the city. I never left there. My body was lost in those tunnels, but my spirit wanders on that platform, trapped in the shadows, turned into one of them. If you pass by Government Center and feel a strange chill in the air, or see an impossible shadow out of the corner of your eye, maybe it's me, trying to warn you. Or maybe it's them, patiently waiting for you to come down, to come closer, to join their silent eternity. Thank you for immersing yourself in these 3 horror stories set in the streets and shadows of Miami. Did they leave you with chills? Did you feel the weight of the shadows as you read? Leave us your comments and tell us what you think of these stories. If you have your own chilling story, send it to us. It could appear in our next episode. Subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night, staring into the dark corners of your room. Because in Miami, between the brightness of the lights and the heat of the tropics, you never know what is watching you from the dark.